And it's not just that animal agriculture is responsible for putting global warming compounds into the atmosphere, but it's also one of the heaviest users of transportation, and it's a leading cause of species extinction and ocean dead zones. So this is why the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change suggests reducing consumption of meat, milk, cheese, and butter as a critical way to reduce your carbon footprint. So here's the really big picture, okay? It takes a lot of biomass to cycle calories through livestock. It takes about 12 pounds of grain or soy to produce a single pound of feedlot beef. And when we're grazing cattle on pasture, that takes a lot of land too. In fact, more land per pound of meat, ultimately. So what does this mean? Well, it means that globally, 82% of the world's agricultural land is being used for animal agriculture to produce 18% of the world's calories. It's like a protein factory in reverse. If just theoretically the whole world went vegan tomorrow, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just play with me here for a second. If it did, we would instantly free up an area of land as large as the totality of all the land of the United States, China, the European Union, and Australia combined. That's how much total land mass would instantly be freed up, which could be used to grow forests, which could be used to grow crops that are designed to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. See, we don't just have to stop spewing carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. We've got to draw them down out of the atmosphere if we're going to create a livable future for humanity, for our children, for our grandchildren on this planet. And by freeing up that land, we can rewild. We can create the space to have the possibility to sequester that carbon. And perhaps in the process, also sequester it while growing awesome, healthy foods to help feed future generations of humanity with sustainable organic crops. The potential here is immense. So eating less or no beef especially is number one on that list, but all animal agriculture is very significant because it takes 12 pounds of grain or soy, as I said, to produce a single pound of feedlot beef, but it takes 3, 4, 5 pounds to produce chicken or pork. Anytime you cycle calories through livestock, you get massive inefficiency. A lot of those calories are going to hoof and hide and bones and feathers and manure and body heat the animal uses to move around and energy. And all of this is, from a resource perspective, it's waste. And on top of that, we're producing waste. Our livestock systems are producing so much concentrated volumes of excrement, and it's not being, for the most part, winding up going right on the land. When we have these concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, or factory farms, there's a huge concentration of waste in a small area, which then ends up turning into lagoons or other forms of pollution that wind up seeping into our groundwater, polluting our ecosystems, which is another set of problems. There's also the issue of deforestation. Right now, we're destroying countless acres of land to grow food like corn or soy for livestock or to create grazing land for cattle. And we're doing it often in very delicate ecosystems like the Amazon rainforest. Not only does this destroy habitats for already endangered species, but it also releases the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere that those plants and trees have absorbed for us. And growing food for livestock emits nitrous oxide. The biggest livestock crops are soy, alfalfa, and corn. Corn is especially dependent on large amounts of carbon-emitting chemical fertilizers, which spew out nitrous oxide. So this is extraordinary, and it's all connected. And, you know, a lot of people talk about worry about world hunger, and they talk about organic food like, oh my gosh, it's less efficient per acre, so we can't do it if we want to feed humanity. We're going to starve if we try to go organic. And it's true. In the short run, organic agriculture tends to lead to a 10 or 20% lower yield per acre than commercial agriculture with lots of pesticides and chemical fertilizers on the same acre of land. That's short term. Long term, it's another story, because organic agriculture, when done right, can sequester carbon. It can it can add to the nutrition of the soil rather than degrading it, making the soil more able to hold water, which means less susceptibility to droughts and floods. And it can produce potentially more nutritious crops long-term and be more sustainable for future generations. So over time, studies from the Rodale Institute and others have shown that it is possible to grow organic food in a way that can be competitive in terms of yield per acre. But short-term, sometimes not so much. So a lot of folks say, oh my gosh, we got 8 billion mouths to feed. We can't afford to go organic. But here's the thing. If we eat lower on the food chain and we free up all this land that's growing corn and soy and other resources and alfalfa for livestock, we free up all that water, we free up all that space. And then, oh my gosh, we could go organic, we could go permaculture and still have lots and lots and lots of land left over. And if we focus on systems of permaculture and organic agriculture that are designed to sequester carbon, then what's possible? What's possible for us to shift things so that we don't just eliminate the #1 agricultural source of emissions of climate chaos fueling, which is animal agriculture, but we replace it with something that draws down carbon. The potential here is absolutely immense. And so, a 2018 article in Nature stated that continued consumption of the Western diet could lead to exceeding key planetary boundaries that define a safe operating space for humanity, beyond which Earth's vital systems could become unstable. So we're up against it, but we can do something about it. And that's the wonderful, wonderful news. And so, some of the best foods for the environment, let's talk about lentils. They come in a bunch of different varieties and they are super low carbon footprint. They're a fantastic replacement for livestock products of all kinds. And lentils are high in plant protein. They're super, super healthy. And they actually, along with all the legumes, they actually fix nitrogen in the soil, making it richer. Tomatoes are great from a carbon standpoint. Dry beans of all kinds are great from a carbon standpoint. And legumes, including dry beans and lentils, and also tofu and tempeh and soy products, these collectively are foods that are eaten widely in the world's healthiest and longest lived communities. They're one food that people in all of the blue zones, the longest lived peoples on Earth, seem to have in common. Studies show that eating more legumes can extend your life expectancy. It can reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, of certain forms of cancer, type 2 diabetes, excess weight. So there's a win-win-win here, right? It's good for the planet. It's also good for animals, and it's also good for us. So these are some of the things that I'm passionate about. And let's talk a little bit about water, because that's another huge one. My name's Ocean, so you'd think I'd care about water, and you'd be right. I think water is pretty important. We live on the water planet. Although 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, most of that is saline. It's salty, so we can't drink it directly. Only a few percent of the Earth's only a few percent of the Earth's water is fresh, and that's what we depend on, and most of that is locked up in glaciers. Unfortunately, that's melting and going into the oceans. But as far as fresh water on land, we depend on that. Well, billions of people right now are actually dependent for their water and for their agricultural communities on water that comes out of the ground. And this groundwater is being depleted at an unsustainable rate. In the state of California, where I live, thank goodness we just got a whole lot of rain. So we're technically out of drought at this moment, but we're still facing a water crisis long term because we got 40 billion people in one state, and we still have a lot of wells. And those wells are where a lot of our water comes from, in fact, most of it. And we are depleting them faster than they are being replenished on the regular. So what happens when the wells run dry? What happens when the aquifers run dry? We're using up water that's been accumulated over millions of years. When those run dry, the pumps stop working. We put in deeper pumps. Some people are putting in pumps that go down a couple thousand feet. It gets super expensive to pull water up from down that far. But people are doing it because they're desperate. What happens when those run dry? It's only a matter of time some say years, some say decades, before we're unable to keep pumping groundwater out of the ground. Same is true of aquifers in the Middle East that provide much of the water for the Middle East and to grow the food that's growing in the Middle East. So then we have the potential for billions of people to be robbed of the water that they have built their civilizations on. They can't grow food. Serious, serious issue. Where's our water going? Well, it turns out that a huge amount of our water is going to animal agriculture. In California, alfalfa in particular. But it's not just alfalfa for cows in California. In fact, in California, we are exporting huge amounts of water in the form of alfalfa, which is a very thirsty crop, to Saudi Arabia and to China, so they can feed it to their livestock. That's right. In a state that is the primary grower of almonds and fruits and vegetables for America and for much of the world, we have a water crisis, and we're exporting our water in the form of alfalfa so that a bunch of other countries can feed livestock. If you ask me, this is lunacy. And the good news is that when we eat lower on the food chain, we can save up oceans of water. In fact, it takes about 2,000 gallons of water to produce a single pound of feedlot beef in the United States today. 2,000 gallons. This means you would save more water by not eating 1 pound of beef than by not showering for 3 months. And the good news is you can save so much water when you eat lower on the food chain. You can save land. You can save energy. You can create the conditions out of which we free up space that we can help sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. This is big stuff, folks. If you're somebody like me who is concerned about the future we're going to leave for our kids, who wants to be able to say to my children, look in their eyes and say, I did all I could to leave you a better future, and you're going to get it. Like, we all want that. Throughout history, our ancestors struggled and fought and died so that we could have a better life than them. So many of us have ancestors that endured hardships we could hardly even imagine so that we could be here today. Isn't it our desire to leave the same for our children? To leave them with the financial security, to leave them with a livable planet? People would love to be able to save up to leave their kids with a home. Well, what about collective home? Don't we want to leave our children a livable planet with water so they can grow their food, with topsoil, with a stable climate? Of course we do. Most of us would give anything for that. But we've turned cold, we've turned numb because some part of us says, oh my gosh, there's no hope. And when we give up hope, we just focus on the narrow definition of self, what we can control, as if the bigger picture was beyond our reach. Well, here's the thing, folks. I believe that the serenity prayer is profound and wise. It says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There are some things that are absolutely in the first category. There are some things we cannot change. And so let us pray for the serenity to accept the world the way that it is, right? Arguing with reality doesn't change reality. It just makes life more miserable. And it actually robs us of our capacity to respond to reality as it is. Okay, so there are some places for serenity in this world. There's a lot beyond our control, but we also need the courage to change the things we can. There is a lot we can do. And future generations have every right to demand of us, to expect of us that we would do our best, that we would stand and work and eat in a way that we best could, so that they would have a world where they could stand and live and eat, so that they could contribute to making a better world for their children, rather than being caught in futile efforts for survival. This is what's at stake for us. And the beautiful thing is that it can feel really good to be part of the solution. It can feel really good to know that your food choices are an expression of your values. Mahatma Gandhi said, my life is my message. Well, folks, our lives are our message when we decide to make it so. And every bite you take is a part of your message, not only to your body, but also to your world and also to future generations. This is profound, it's powerful, it's real. So, my friends, I want to invite you to consider for a moment what the world means to you and what kind of legacy you want to leave for future generations. And I want to invite you to consider the possibility that when you're part of the solution and you know it, when you're eating with integrity and conscience, it can feel really good. It's not the whole story. There's more we need to do. We could all go vegan, and that wouldn't be enough by itself. But it's a big piece of the puzzle. And there was another study that came out a few years back, which looked at the costs of mitigating climate change. And researchers concluded that it would cost about $40 trillion ultimately over the course of decades to reverse the climate crisis. Now that sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? $40 trillion. Who can even wrap their head around a number that big? Except for one thing, which is that another study found that if we changed our food choices to go plant-based, we could eliminate about half of that cost. In other words, we could save about $20 trillion worth of climate mitigation efforts just with that one simple action. If we ate lower on the food chain and then use that land to sequester carbon intelligently. So $20 trillion then is still a big number, right? But here's the thing. The cost economically of the modern industrialized diet is enormous. We have research from the Global Burden of Disease report telling us that food is the #1 cause of death and disease on planet Earth for humanity. And in the United States right now, we spend about 19% of our entire gross domestic product on what we call healthcare, which is really disease symptom management, right? Because 80% of that is treating the symptoms of chronic disease. It's not like you go into the doctor because you break your arm and you get a cast and it gets better and then you feel well again. No, chronic disease means it's something you live with day in and day out, incessantly, ongoingly. And you may take drugs, you may go through surgeries to deal with the symptoms of it, but it doesn't go away, okay? So 80% of our healthcare spending is on treating symptoms of chronic disease, not on helping people get well, truly get well, right? More and more of us are taking prescription meds on the daily. We're feeling like crap all day long. We're suffering from the status quo. Now, it turns out that the vast majority of the chronic diseases of our times could be prevented and in often cases even reversed with changes to diet and lifestyle. Credible researchers tell us we could prevent 80% of cardiovascular disease, 90% of type 2 diabetes, almost all obesity. We now know that we could prevent up to 90% of Alzheimer's disease with healthier diet and lifestyle, and 50% of cancers or more. Put all that together, what could we save? What could we save in human life, in human resourcefulness? All the years that people wouldn't have to spend feeling like crap and feeling sick, sucking the lifeblood out of their family because they need to be taken care of in their pain and suffering, instead of giving and contributing. Elders could be babysitting the grandkids instead of needing to have in-home care, right? What's possible if we liberate energy and creativity and human vitality and save all this kind of money? What's that going to do for our global economy? How many trillions of dollars could we save with healthier diet and lifestyle? It turns out that we could probably save, $1 trillion a year or more with diet and lifestyle changes if we optimize diet and lifestyle. In the United States alone, worldwide, much, much more. So over the course of a generation or two, we could save more than all the remaining costs of addressing the climate crisis. We could save money. We could have a more robust economy. We could have a more vital population. We could add years to our life and life to our years. This is what's at stake, folks. This is the power of the food on our plates. Food can hurt us, but food can also heal us. And here's the other beautiful thing, I think. food doesn't just affect how long we live, it also affects how alive we feel. When you eat the foods that contribute to cardiovascular health, you don't just create the conditions where you're less likely to die of the world's #1 killer, which is heart disease. You also create the conditions where you have better circulation, which might mean you have more pleasure, more aliveness, more vitality in your body. When you eat foods that help to prevent your risk of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, you don't just forestall a crisis later in life. You could have a clearer mind right now and more ability to remember the things that matter the most to you. When you eat the foods that help you to have more balanced blood sugar, you don't just help to prevent type 2 diabetes, you could also have more peace and more resilience in your life. The same food choices that contribute to pushing away chronic disease are the same food choices that contribute to more vitality and more joy. This is really big because on the end of our forks, we hold a key to planetary survival. We hold a key to personal survival. We hold a key to be able to give the gifts we were born to give. There's a saying that the two most important days in your life are the day you were born, and the day you discover why you were born. Well, I say that when you eat the right food, you have more opportunity to live your purpose. Instead of being stuck in a cycle of ever-increasing misery and pain, you get to be a part of the solution. You get to make a contribution. You create the conditions out of which it's so much easier to love your life when you're not living in chronic pain. This is so beautiful. And here's the other piece that I think is important to touch on, is that food impacts the other creatures with whom we share this earth. I don't know about you, but I love animals. I've had cats and dogs in my life, and the experience of crossing the species barrier and looking in an animal's eyes and feeling the love that we can feel even though we don't have words is so precious. I've experienced this with pigs. I've spent time with baby pigs and looked at them and mama pigs, seeing them suckling their babes, and they're so cute. They say that pigs are more intelligent than dogs. I've seen chickens nestling their chicklings just like a mother hen, they say. Yeah, they take care of each other. There's love, there's feelings, absolutely, across the species. So the thing is, though, that humans aren't treating animals especially well. You know, we have laws against animal cruelty in every state in the United States, but in every single state in the US, we also have specific exemptions for those laws carved out when the animals are being raised for food. In that case, all that farmers have to do is do what's normal in the industry, and they're okay. Unfortunately, normal is